Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. Today we are going to tackle the epic hell difficulty of the Kiss of Frost Advent side story. So very excited to get to use this new content. This was a pretty cool challenge. It was very difficult to work out a good team, but after a bunch of testing and talking to other people, I was able to figure it out. We'll go over all of the phases in a lot more detail as I show you an example run, but I can give you a quick overview of the teams I use and why I picked them. Team 1, it's very important to have AoE skills, so all three of these heroes have AoE. Immunity and Cleanse was also nice, so that's why I brought these two. The mechanics in Team 2 favor that you have a lot of buffs on your team, so Rowana has Revive, Landy has Speed, Mort has Anti-Crit, lots of buffs. Rowana can put shields or barriers up, so that's another thing. And there's also a lot of extra attacks in Phase 2, so Rowana's really good for that. She'll give a tremendous amount of passive healing, and then Mort does Defense Break, which is important. For Phase 3, you want a ton of cleansing mechanics, and it's really tough to get that along with damage, so I took heroes that can cleanse themselves just passively. So we have Fighter Maya here and Tsurin are just constantly cleansing themselves, and then Maid Chloe is here for attack buff and sustain, and revive, in the event that something goes bad, and her skill 3 also cleanses itself. So I think a really good Team 3 here. You do get bonuses if you use everyone of the same element, which is important, but not necessary. As you can see here for Team 2, I just ignored it. So we can go ahead and go through a sample fight. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you do too. Okay, so the name of the game for Phase 1 is really just bring 3 AoE DPS heroes. It doesn't have to be these 3. They also don't have to be super tanky. My Vildred and Vivian are both quite squishy and they survive just fine. You want to have a lot of AoE damage because the boss is in stealth, and you have to kill those 3 adds to get the boss out of stealth. Another mechanic to be aware of is the boss has a permanent defense buff and attack buff. That's those gold icons under the health bar there at the top. And they cannot be dispelled normally. You have to do special things in Phase 1 and 2 to get rid of them. In Phase 1, you have to hit the boss with AoE abilities 5 times after the adds are dead. So that killed the adds. Here's another AoE from Vivian with no adds, so that counts as 1. And Holiday Euphine is going to attack with her AoE ability on her skill 1, and that'll count as 2. And so once you get to 5, the attack buff goes away. Other than that, that's pretty much it for this phase. Holiday Euphine is really nice because she has a Dispel on her skill 3, and you will occasionally get dispelled, or debuffed I should say, by the adds. They can put a Mist debuff on you, and the boss I believe can put a slow debuff on you. So it's nice to be able to cleanse those away in the event that they land. And other than that, I think that's pretty much it for this phase. It's fairly straightforward. You can see Arbiter Vildred is getting counterattacked by the adds. That happens when you attack, I believe, with a non-AoE ability. Or no, I guess it doesn't matter. They can just counterattack you whenever. And you can see they just put Mist Chance on Holiday Euphine. I think otherwise this phase is very straightforward. I've done it 3 or 4 times now and have not failed, although once I think Holiday Euphine did die. Probably just a factor of how many times she gets crit, more than anything else really. So here you can see once the add dies, the boss comes out of stealth. Vivian AoEs for the 5th time, and that gets rid of the attack buff. And that's pretty much it for this phase. Okay, so moving into Phase 2, now we have this Yeti add. He'll attack you throughout the fight, and he can debuff you, I believe, with Unbuffable and potentially one other debuff. The boss still has that permanent defense buff, and you have to get rid of it in this phase by attacking the Yeti 7 times with single target attacks. So this AoE from Landy here, that does not count. And so what I tried to do with this fight was attack the boss with my DPS heroes, and then whenever possible I would single target attack the Yeti with Rowana, because she doesn't really do much damage anyways. A passive mechanic throughout this whole fight is that the boss gets a stackable increase attack and speed pretty much whenever you hit it, so there you could see that happened. Defense Break from Mort really helps this phase go by quickly. There are a lot of team comps that can beat this phase safely, but time is definitely of the essence because of this attacking speed and attack buff every time you attack. If you take too long on this phase, the boss, I think, just gets too strong and you can't kill it. So you need to bring enough damage. I was trying this with Landy, Diane, and Rowana, and it was perfectly safe. You'd get through it, but the boss had way too many stacks, I think. So one debuff you can get is this like snow curse, the little red snow crystal there, and that'll make you take additional damage whenever you get hit and push you back. And I think the damage is proportional to your health, so it'll hurt high health heroes more, essentially. The boss also, I believe, has a mechanic that reduces the damage it takes from HP scaling heroes. So that's, I guess, a strike against Mort, but I really brought him here for the defense break and the buffs, and his damage was kind of a side bonus. Speaking of damage, another mechanic for this part of the fight is if you have less than 2 buffs, your heroes take more damage. So as long as you have 2 or more buffs, the damage is reduced by, it's like 30% or something. And so that's why it's important to have a lot of, buffs from your different heroes. It'll just reduce the overall damage your team takes. Other than that, I think this fight is pretty straightforward, just like the first round. Rowana is really nice here for healing since there's a lot of extra attacks, in this phase, and that provides a ton of healing for your team. So once you have all that set up, it's just a matter of counting the number of hits you need on the Yeti to get rid of that defense buff while slowly knocking the boss down and progressing into phase 3.
Shall we test fate? I will show you grace by granting you death.
For Felicia. This is just the beginning. May the light free you from despair.
Miserable creature. I'll leave it to you.
I'll help.
I will lend you my strength.
Leave it to me. You didn't see this coming.
Death has come for you.
Why not surrender? I must be brave.
You may be worth my attention.
For Felicia.
Okay, so here we are in phase 3. I think this phase caused people a lot of consternation because you need a ton of cleansing in this fight. And so, I was trying like a Tywin, it just wasn't enough. Fighter Maya and T-Cern are really helpful for this because they just cleanse themselves constantly, and that's really nice. A mechanic to be mindful of, I'm pointing it out here, is that you can't use AoE abilities in this fight. Or AoE attacks, I should say. If you do, it'll trigger the boss to counterattack with Snowstorm. Snowstorm is an AoE attack, and it's that ability on the far right of the skill bar there for the boss. Here it is, the boss just used it. It pushes everybody back on the CR bar, it strips buffs, and it does damage. So it's really annoying, and if you trigger it with an AoE ability, I think it counts as like an extra attack, so the boss will attack twice, and that'll just kill T-Cern, which is no good. So only single targets for this fight. And other than that, it's really easy with all this cleanse. If you get that Snow Crystal debuff and the boss snowstorms you, it does a ton more damage, and it pushes you back even more. So that's why cleansing is so important, in addition to, the debuff just being annoying. I think otherwise the Snow Crystal does the same thing as it did in phase 2. It just makes you take more damage, and also pushes you back on the CR bar whenever you take damage. Maid Chloe is nice because she brings attack buff. The healing's really important as well, and the revive is really nice in case you get an untimely death. But I think this is really safe. Phase 2 seems probably the most RNG. I'll go over my heroes, how I built them and stuff next. There you see Fighter Maya gets a really big S3 off because the boss is under 1/3 health. And so I think the fight is pretty much over at this point.
I'm not cheap. I was waiting. I'm ready. Yeah. I'll show you what I can do. Ow! I was born to fight. Let's do this. All right. Okay.
Okay, so let's go over the heroes I use for the different phases. For the phase 1 team, we have Arbiter Vildred. He is on my PvP build, so it's pretty standard in terms of stat distribution, which is, pure damage and speed. So I didn't change any of his gear. This is just the stuff I use normally for PvP. Same thing, he's on Basket for that reason. He's here just to do AoE damage and to do as much as possible. Vivian, another hero for the phase 1 team. She was nice because of the immunity she brought. Also very squishy, didn't really add much bulk to her. But Dignus Orb was really nice for that. Giving the barrier increased her survivability and I think helped her last throughout the phase, without a tank or healer. In terms of her gear, it's fairly random. Like, I didn't try to optimize one thing in particular. I just threw on gear that other people were not using. And she ended up with 242 speed. I think ideally you'd put her faster than Vildred so that she would always get immunity and attack buff on him. I think one of the times I did it, he went first, but it doesn't really matter. Let's see, the last person we used for Team 1 was Holiday Euphine. Again, she's not optimized. This is random world boss gear, but it worked fine for this fight. She's tanky enough to be able to take a few hits and also do a decent amount of damage herself. She was really valuable for doing AoE attacks constantly, to help get rid of that attack buff. I have her on Snow Crystal because that's what I use for PvP, but you could potentially pick a better one for this encounter. So for phase 2, we used all green heroes, and Rowana was probably the MVP. Her passive healing is really amazing for this fight because there's so many extra attacks. I used Stella Harpa for her artifact because it helped cleanse away the debuffs. This is admittedly RNG, so you could theoretically do a run where she's not cleansing anything and you get overwhelmed by the debuffs, like I think it did happen on one run. So it may not be 100% successful, but just restart, and if you don't get super bad RNG, it should be fine. She's built super tanky with ER for PvP, and it worked totally fine for this run. I also used Landy, who's also on a PvP build. I debated about making her tankier, but to be honest, I saw Carrots doing like 17, 18k damage on Landy's, and I thought, well, she's gonna die either way, so I'll just leave her build as it is. And Landy's basically here just to do damage, so I didn't have to change her PvP build that much. She still did plenty for this fight, and also for speed buff, which is really nice from her skill 3. Gives speed buff for your team. So having another buff for that fight is important. And last up we have the Great Mortellix. Molded back from when I was excited and thought he would be good, and then they changed Frenzy and made him a dumpster tier hero, so that was awesome. Mort I built just fast enough to take turns, and then I wanted as much crit damage as possible because I wanted him to bring damage to the fight, since I didn't want this phase to drag out super long, and also some HP because he scales off of that. I just gave him his artifact. I figured that would increase the amount of damage he did, which would be helpful. He was here for buffs, anti-crit from his passive and also defense break, and then some added bonus damage. And so he worked out pretty well. Maid Chloe was for phase 3, and she's on a standard, or my standard PvP build, I should say. Usually I have her on Potion Vial. I have her on Shamadra right now. I forget why. I was testing something out, I think. So this is her build. She's tanky, she's fast, she has EFR. It's nice because she goes fast and can put up attack buff. So she was a good support hero for this phase. Fighter Maya was probably the MVP. She's on her old PvP build, haven't really changed it. Tons of defense, decent amount of HP, a little bit of speed, and then a good amount of crit damage. And she's here for damage and the fact that she cleanses herself. Elbrus is what I used for PvP on her, and I think it actually worked out really well because she was able to jump in and add a bunch of damage when other people on the team would get hit. Last up is Tisurin. T-Surin also worked out really well because she could cleanse herself. Again, she's on a PvP build, so I didn't have to touch anything. I just brought her in, which was a big plus. She's on quite premium lifesteal gear, so I think it's hard to get these stats. She's quite fast and does a good chunk of damage. Would be nice if her attack could get higher, but that's hard to do because I think her base attack is kind of low. Other than that, I think this explains everything, so if you have any questions, let me know. I'd be excited what teams you guys used, and if you were able to clear Epic Hell, so let me know in the comment section below. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. That's all for now. Later.